Hello, and welcome to Understanding Your Role with OPG as a foster or kinship carer. We appreciate your time to learn about OPG and how we work with you as current or future carers. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands across Queensland where we gather today. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander guests with us, and honour the First Nations children we support. My name is Rachel Meehan. I'm the Senior Community Education and Engagement Officer here at the Office of the Public Guardian, also known as OPG. Joining me today are Christy Lee and Tegan from OPG's Community Visiting and Advocacy teams. Together, we will provide you with an overview of OPG's roles and functions, with a focus on the roles and responsibilities of the community visitors and child advocates. Our goal is to inform and empower you so that together we can work to support the children and young people in your care. The Office of the Public Guardian was established in July 2014 under the Public Guardian Act 2014. It is an independent statutory office. This means we work independently from other government and non-government agencies like the Department of Child Safety, police, courts, and service providers. We have approximately 300 staff working to promote and protect the rights of vulnerable adults and children through our core functions like guardianship, investigations, and community visiting and advocacy. Our work is guided by a legal framework set out in the Public Guardian Act and the Guardianship and Administration Act 2000. We have offices located in Brisbane CBD, Cairns, Townsville and Ipswich, and our community visitors work remotely across Queensland. I'd now like to hand over to Christy Lee, who will discuss the roles and responsibilities of community visitors and how they work with you and the young people they visit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. I'm Christy Lee and I'm in the Principal Practice Leader role with the Community Visiting and Advocacy Program. I've been within this program for the last 10 years and I'm really looking forward to speaking to you all in relation to the role of community visitors and how we work in partnership with foster carers and kinship carers. It's important to note that OPG is a child-safe organisation. At the OPG, our mission is to ensure the safety, well-being and empowerment of children and young people. During this presentation, Tegan and I will share how community visitors and child advocate legal officers play a crucial role in achieving these goals. At the OPG, we believe that every child deserves to feel safe, valued and supported, regardless of their gender, age, cultural backgrounds or circumstances. Our focus is on making sure children's voices are heard and their views are taken into account when decisions are made about their lives. Protecting their rights is at the core of everything we do. We have a zero tolerance for abuse or neglect, and any concerns about child safety are treated with the utmost seriousness and referred to the appropriate authorities. We are also deeply committed to promoting the cultural safety of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, as well as children from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So let's talk more about the community visiting and advocacy role in Queensland. One of the key takeaways is that we support children and young people through our community visiting and advocacy program. Our community visitors play a vital role in protecting and promoting the rights and interests of children and young people in the child protection system. We operate independently from other government agencies and our CVs work remotely to visit and support local children, young people and vulnerable adults across Queensland. Unlike other states and territories, Queensland's community visitors and child advocates are a very unique role. Like the rest of the OPG, CV's work is guided by the Public Guardian Act 2014, and this ensures the child's best interests remain at the heart of everything that we do. This legal framework ensures independence and prioritises face-to-face engagement which fosters meaningful connections with those in out-of-home care. So what does a community visitor do? Our community visitors' priority is to listen to the child's views and wishes, even if those views differ from others, such as carers or caseworkers. Whilst we can't always guarantee that every request can be met, we make inquiries to ensure that children's voices are heard, their opinions are considered, and that they understand the decisions and the reasons behind those decisions. If we find that a service provider or agency hasn't acted in a child's best interests, we take action to ensure their rights are upheld. This could mean raising the issue with a relevant organisation or asking them to review their decision to ensure that it aligns with the child's rights and needs. Carers are also encouraged to refer any concerns to child safety or to their foster care agency. Ultimately, the role of the CV is to focus and advocate for children and young people, ensuring their voices are respected and their care meets the standards that they deserve. So who does a community visitor visit? Queensland's community visiting program is the largest in Australia, with over 100 community visitors working across 13 zones and visiting about 7,500 sites. We actually cover an area of 1.7 million square kilometres. Community visitors visit children and young people in a range of settings, known as a visitable location. These include foster and kinship care homes, residential care facilities, watch houses and youth detention centres, mental health services, youth shelters, and boarding schools. Our goal is to ensure every child in these settings has someone independent to listen to them and advocate for their rights. A child is considered a relevant child under the Public Guardian Act if they are in the child protection system and under a care order, a temporary custody order, or an agreement involving child safety. So a big question we often get is how often do CVs visit? So the frequency of our visits depends on the child's circumstances, and it's determined by the regional visiting manager as a delegate of the public guardian. We prioritise visits to children in residential care, mental health services, and youth shelters. Visits to foster and kinship care homes are directed by the public guardian and are assessed using a consistent tool that determines how often visits are needed. Regardless, scheduled visits of what the visiting frequency is or how often we're scheduled to visit, please remember all children and young people can request a visit at any time. And we really appreciate your support in facilitating and supporting young people to reach out to us if they'd like a visit. So what is the visiting and advocacy process for community visitors? Community visitors firstly prioritise their visits based on the information and determination of the public guardian. They plan the visit by reviewing all the relevant information in relation to the young person, and they contact the foster and kinship carers or residential care providers to schedule a time to visit that's convenient for the household. The CV then conducts the visit, and after the visit they complete a visit report. This visit report details any observations or views that were shared during the visit. From this, if there's any identified advocacy needs, the community visitor refers these to the relevant department, which is generally child safety, and they seek to obtain a resolution. So how does a community visitor help young people? At the OPG, we know individual advocacy can empower a child or young person, not just by having someone speak up for them, but by also providing them with information about their rights and options. Our advocacy is delivered through the dedicated efforts of both community visitors and child advocate legal officers. We strive to ensure children understand their rights and are actively involved in the decisions about their lives. but most importantly, that they're provided with clear explanations about the reasons behind the decisions made about their lives. Even when the outcome isn't what they hoped for, knowing their voices were heard and respected can be empowering for children and young people in itself. We work closely with carers and service providers by prioritising the safety of children, ensuring they have access to the support services that they need to thrive. It's really important to note, though, it's not the role of a community visitor to decide what support services a child requires. However, we can make inquiries in relation to access to support services if another professional identifies the need or makes a recommendation. And what happens during a visit to a foster and kinship care home? The powers when performing the community visitor role differ depending on whether the community visitor is visiting a child home or a visitable site, such as a residential care. When a community visitor or child advocate comes to a foster or kinship home, they'll always explain the purpose of their visit and ask for the carer's consent to enter the home. If consent is given, the carer will receive a written acknowledgement of this. There's provisions under the Public Guardian Act that allow community visitors the power to visit homes. The carer is required to give the visitor reasonable help during the visit and allow the young person to speak privately with a community visitor. So what are community visitors looking for during a visit? During a visit, community visitors focus on ensuring the child's safety, well-being and rights. They look for things like whether the child is involved in age-appropriate decision-making, whether they're spoken to and about with dignity and respect, the quality of their relationships with carers and others in the household, whether they have their own belongings, bed, toys and activities, and whether they're being supported to grow and develop. Our aim is to ensure every child feels safe, respected, and valued in their care environment. So how do we request a visit? If a child or young person would like a visit from a community visitor, they can request one directly or ask a carer or staff member to arrange it for them. Carers or staff members must inform the OPG as soon as possible if a visit's requested by a young person. Once we're notified, a community visitor will connect with the child as soon as practicable to identify their advocacy needs and whether they'd like a visit. Any other person, including professionals, can request a visit if advocacy needs are identified. Approval is at the Public Guardian's discretion though, ensuring that the request aligns with the community visitor's role and the functions. We make it easy to stay in touch. Community visitors share their contact details with children, carers and support workers, which are also displayed at visitable sites. To request a visit, contact us via phone, email, SMS, or through the Contact Us page on our website. We're here to ensure children's voices are heard and their rights are protected. Reach out at any time for support.
Thanks, Christy Lee. That was very informative. Now that we've covered the role of OPG and community visitors, it's time to introduce another vital part of OPG, the child advocates. To explain more about the role of the child advocate, let me now hand over to Tegan.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Tegan. I'm an acting senior legal officer within a very small team called the Children and Young People team. And thank you, Christy Lee, for covering over in some spots where our roles are linked and crossover. So what is the role of a child advocate? Child advocates assist children and young people who are either on an interim or a final child protection order, or whose families are under some type of intervention by child safety. These are what we call relevant children for our program. Our role is legal advocacy, which ensures that in certain legal proceedings or issues that children and young people's rights, their human rights or their charter rights under the Child Protection Act are upheld, that their views and wishes are made known to decision makers or people involved in their life, and that they are able to participate in meetings, conferences, courts, or tribunals in a way that is age appropriate and in a way that they choose. Why do we do this? We do this because children and young people have an active right to participate in certain proceedings that are about them and decisions that are being made about them. Child advocates are slightly different to CBs in that we are able to visit children and young people who may not be accessing a placement. So children who are in both visitable and non-visitable locations. And this essentially means if a young person is choosing to self-select and not staying with either a residential or a kinship or general foster placement. It's important for our children and young people and anyone that's working with them to know that although a lot of what we discuss with them is confidential, we, similar to the CBs, are still mandatory reporters. So the biggest thing, I suppose, to remember is that the child advocate legal officers are able to support children and young people whose families have some type of involvement with child protection applications or orders, and where there is some type of legal advocacy or a legal issue or a legal remedy. So what are the functions? Our functions and the reasons why we're able to intervene primarily fall under the Public Guardian Act. But essentially, we have an obligation to build a trusting and supportive relationship with the children and young people that we support. And the legislation has a really big focus on this. So in terms of carers, this means that often we make every effort to meet with that child or young person in person. And a lot of the times that's going to be at their placement. We have a requirement to support them to participate in meetings and conferences and make any official complaints against certain agencies. Sometimes that may include their child safety officer. And if a proceeding or a review decision does make its way to what's called a final hearing, we are able to support the child and make submissions for them, call witnesses, test evidence in court proceedings, if that is the way that that young person is choosing to participate in those proceedings. So who can we support and essentially what our criteria is very helpful for you to know. I touched briefly on what a relevant child is. So we are only able to support children or young people where there is some type of intervention or a child protection application or order. When we are doing what's called instructed or views and wishes advocacy, we require the children or young person to have what's called capacity. We're not looking at any strict legal capacity, but we do need that child or young person to be able to firstly consent to a referral to our team. And we're also looking at whether they are able to identify and express their views and wishes, their concerns. And what we may look at when we get a referral is what is the age of the young person, what's their ability to communicate, what does their maturity look like, and can they consent to a referral? Do they understand what our job is and the questions that we may be asking them? So for example, if we were to receive a referral for a 2-year-old, it would be extremely difficult for us to have a discussion with a 2-year-old about what is court, what's happening there, and what are your views on that. But again, we're certainly not requiring any strict legal capacity. It's just how can that young person and how can we help them communicate with us? The next thing to look at is there a legal issue? So we have to identify whether potentially another stakeholder may be best suited to support. Maybe our great CVs can assist if there is an issue, but it's not particularly a legal issue. Maybe their CSO can assist, or another stakeholder involved in their lives. And I'll speak in the next slide a little bit more about the majority of the legal issues that we see. Does the child want to participate? So that's kind of going back to consent. Have they consented for a referral to be made to us? We are voluntary based referral system. So we want the children and young people to not be forced to come and speak with us. We certainly need consent from them to reach out to them and start that advocacy for them. And then finally, does that child or young person want the support of a child advocate? So although they may consent for us to come out and visit them and have a chat with them about what their options are, they may say, that's all great, Tegan, thanks for the information, but I actually want to leave it up to the adults, and I prefer not to be involved. So the consent for us to visit is very different for the child being presented with their options and a bit of information around what's going on, and then they're able to make the decision of, yeah, I do want to be involved, or no, I don't. So I spoke before about there having to be a legal issue or a legal remedy, something along that line for us to help and assist a young person. Just wanted to touch on some of our major ones that we see. Firstly is our child protection applications and legal permanency. This is probably the biggest area of work that we do. So children and young people under the Child Protection Act have a clear right to participate in child proceedings if they choose to do so. Again, this is all voluntary. They're able to participate in lots of different and child-friendly ways. They're able to come along to court. They're able to come along to any court mention that's occurring, just as a parent would, and we're able to support them to do that. They're also able to make submissions through like written submissions, either that they can do themselves or we prepare for them and on their behalf. And we are also able to arrange for the child or young person to meet in person with the magistrate, so the decision makers. Along with any of the court events that are happening, they also have rights to participate in significant meetings about them or mediations. Another piece of work that we do are reviewable decisions and contact and placement decisions in QCAT. Very similar to child protection proceedings, a child is able to participate in those proceedings in a way that they choose. Again, attending any review mentions, making written submissions, meeting with tribunal members. The only difference is that a child or young person is able to also file their own review in QCAT. And these may be if a child's contact has been reduced with a parent, or if they have been moved from a placement that they were satisfied with and they were not happy with that decision. We also do appeals or decisions that have been made by schools to suspend or expel students, and that is through a review with the Queensland Education Department. And we do complementary youth justice advocacy. The term is coined as complementary because children and young people will be provided by the state a criminal lawyer, but we are able in some circumstances to help do some placement advocacy if, for example, a young person is not able to access bail because of a lack of a placement. So we can do some advocacy with child safety to try and improve that situation. Other legal issues can be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and in the past we've done things such as name change advocacy, human rights complaints, and in some exceptional circumstances, non-instructed advocacy. So how we meet with children and young people, very similar to CVs. We meet with a child or a young person on their own. This allows them to speak freely and build that trust and confidence with us so that they can ask us any questions that they would like. We always try to prioritise at least our initial visits with each child or young person in person. If we've got a younger child or even the older children, we'll bring along fidgets, colouring ins, whatever it may be. If we've been told that they're into sport, we might bring along a ball or something so that we can really try and make it as age appropriate and not as, I guess, daunting for them. We generally like to be out of earshot of whoever else is in the house, but for the comfort of both the carer or the parent and the child, for that carer to be somewhere in the house, maybe in line of sight or just somewhere very close and accessible. I always love to meet with my children and young people, maybe out on a patio or outside. We're a bit separated, but they feel if they need that support from their carer, they're quite close to them as well. Like I said in the start, we always try and prioritize in-person visits. We try and get out as much as we can to keep those in-person visits up, but sometimes we can't do that. You will sometimes find that we contact children quite often, and then there may be a space of a couple of weeks where we haven't contacted. It really all depends on what's happening in either court or with the issue that we're assisting them with. And how to make a referral. So we certainly are a referrals-based program, but anybody can make a referral. The child and young person can, carers can, any stakeholder can at all. The easiest way to find our referral form is to jump on our website and you email the completed form to our fantastic legal admin. Child advocates can't be appointed by the court like some other stakeholders involved in child protection proceedings. And even though we have child advocates based in Cairns, Brisbane, Townsville, Gold Coast, we service children all across Queensland. So our visits would just be on the phone or the best way that we can service them. But it doesn't mean that if they're not in our hubs where our child advocates are, that a child can't be referred to our team. An important thing is obviously, like I've mentioned before, to confirm that child's consent to make that referral, because we're unable to proceed with allocating a child advocate if we don't have that consent. So information to include in a referral, I've spoken about the consent. General information, child's name, date of birth, who the CSO is. Really, the more information that you provide us on the referral, the quicker it will be for us to process. If we're missing some type of information, we'll either contact you, but there can be delays if we don't have the context, because we are trying to identify what's a legal issue, when is potentially the next court date, do we have enough capacity in the team to help? And at the moment, our referrals are taking approximately 6 weeks to process, but that does change depending on our capacity.
Thanks, Tegan. I really appreciate your time in explaining the role of the child advocate and how you support the young people and children. Okay, we've covered a lot today, so let's take a moment to summarise some key points. The Office of the Public Guardian safeguards the rights and wellbeing of children and young people in out-of-home care through our two functions, community visitors and child advocates. And thanks both to Christy Lee and Tegan for explaining more about those roles and what you do. It's really important to note that we operate independently of child safety, courts, police and any other agencies. And we, CVs and child advocates, listen to children and young people, they make observations and they document their findings in a visit report. So any advocacy needs that they identify will often get referred on to the likes of child safety, and then we'll work with them to find a resolution. Most importantly, I think for today's take home is that carers, your support is most appreciated. And by ensuring you and the young person are at home for scheduled visits, it gives the child an opportunity to share their views with the community visitor and the child advocate. And probably lastly, Anyone can request a CV visit or make a referral to the Child Advocate team. So you can do so by the OPG website or giving us a call on that 1300 number 653 187. Okay, so we're now going to move to answering your questions on the Q&A section of this Teams meeting. Thanks to those who've already submitted some questions. Please just remember we can only answer your general inquiries. Any sort of case-specific inquiries, you'll need to email us or give us a call. And if we run out of time today to answer your question, please don't worry. We will answer the information. We will provide the information in a post-webinar email along with the recording of this webinar. So we did actually receive a question earlier on, and this one is for you, Christy Lee. How does CVs engage with children who have disability needs or language barriers?
Great question. So as Tegan shared, we're similar to the child advocates in the sense that we will try to get to know what that young person might like. If we've got information that they like a particular game or they like a sport, we'll try and bring activities. Or potentially have a look at what things other community visitors have previously engaged with in the home. You know, is it that they like to play outside or, you know, do some drawing and things like that. We'll, as much as possible, try to understand the young person's disability needs and any communication needs, as well as identifying whether there's any specific communication devices or communication strategies that work best to engage with that young person. Where possible, if a young person does require Auslan or another communication kind of support, we can look at having interpreters come along to our visits. At other times, we might utilise the foster or kinship carer or residential carer to help us to try and engage where that's appropriate. We also look at using plain language as much as possible. So, you know, taking our time, explaining things in plain language that might be more understandable, and allowing that space, I guess, for the young person to share their views and wishes in the way that they can. So, yeah, that's virtually how we try to engage young people in that space.
Thanks. Okay, Marnie has asked a question. Thanks, Marnie. So all children in the categories of a relevant children, I think that means, previously listed will be visited by a community visitor who receives copies of the report. And she's also asked what happens if a carer does not consent to the community visitor entering the home. So Christy Lee, that's probably for you. So all children in the categories previously listed will be visited by a community visitor. Is that the case?
That's correct, Marnie. Thank you for your question. So in all those categories, they'll be visited. Under the Public Guardian Act, visits to children in residential care, mental health facilities, youth detention centres and youth shelters are prioritised for a visit. However, we do also have an assessment tool to determine the frequency of visits to children in foster and kinship care homes as well. In terms of our visit reports, they're an internal visit report, so they remain within the Community Visiting and Advocacy Program and they're not accessible or provided to other people unless they're requested under rights to information, and that's obviously a more formal kind of process, and information's redacted where it's not required in terms of the request or to protect the confidentiality of others. And your question in relation to whether a carer doesn't consent to a visit. So under the Public Guardian Act, the community visitors do have the powers to visit children in foster and kinship care homes, residential care facilities, and all the other visitable sites we mentioned. We absolutely, though, want to do that in partnership with foster care and kinship carers. We want to do that in a way that is least disruptive to the household, least disruptive to the young person, and is really, I guess, trauma informed in the way we engage with young people. So we will absolutely try to work with foster carers in relation to any worries or barriers in relation to our visits and be as flexible as we can in relation to that. We will also, work with child safety officers and foster care support agencies to look at how we can make visits occur in a way that is supportive of everyone in the household. And as I said, that is least intrusive for the household and for young people.
And then Marnie also asks, is the assessment tool publicly available?
Yeah, good question, Marnie. It's actually not publicly available because it's quite a nuanced kind of process. I guess that is the determination of the regional visiting managers when utilising that that assessment tool. It also changes at times depending on different priorities, I guess, or risk assessments that occur. And so it's not something that is readily available, but it is something that community visitors will speak to foster and kinship carers about in terms of what visiting frequency the child's on and how likely we're going to be, visiting.
Great questions, Marnie. Thanks for engaging with us. We really appreciate them. They're good questions. Trevor has asked a question. Are you able to support a young person who has now aged out of care, for example, to access victim support?
Unfortunately, once a young person transitions from care, they're no longer considered a relevant child under the Public Guardian Act. So we can't directly provide advocacy. However, we are always happy to receive phone calls in relation to that, and we'll provide information about other services that might be able to assist, or links to websites and resources. We want to ensure that all young people at any age are feeling supported and have access to the information about their rights and services. So whilst we can't do that direct advocacy, we will do everything we can to provide that person with the information to support them.
Thanks, Christy Lee. Now, are there any other questions? You're welcome to put them in the Q&A chat. We're happy to have Christy Lee or Tegan answer them for you. No? Okay. Well, we are going to now move on to how to stay in touch. If you haven't already, we encourage you to subscribe to stay updated on OPG news. Also follow us on LinkedIn for events and updates, and check out our YouTube channel for where you'll find videos. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this session both informative and valuable. Our contact details are now on the screen if you have any further questions or inquiries.